Imagine yourself in a dim courtroom in Nuremberg, 1946. The world is demanding justice. Adolf Eichmann, the architect of mass deportations, takes the stand. The prosecutor asks why he ordered such horrors. The translator pauses, the entire room holding its breath. Then, in a flat voice, Eichmann answers, "I was just following orders. No rage, no shame, just obedience." This defense wasn't rare. Soldier after soldier, bureaucrat after bureaucrat, gave the same excuse. And here's the truly disturbing part. Psychology suggests that if you had been in his position, there's about a 73% chance you would have obeyed too. We like to imagine ourselves as moral, independent, resistant. But experiment after experiment reveals a darker truth. Most people, when told by an authority figure to inflict harm, comply. Not soldiers, not villains, ordinary people, people like you. And if you're thinking, "I'd never do that," the evidence says otherwise. This episode takes you deep into the studies that shocked the world, exposes the hidden psychology of obedience, and reveals why defiance is so rare, but so powerful. Because this isn't just about history. It's about what you and I might do if someone in authority gave us the wrong order tomorrow. Picture yourself walking into a Yale University lab in 1961. A man in a crisp lab coat greets you and explains you're participating in a study on learning and memory. Another participant, smiling, seemingly calm, is strapped into a chair with electrodes attached to his arms. Your role? Read him questions. Every wrong answer, you flip a switch delivering an electric shock. At first, the shocks are mild. 15 volts, 45 volts, 75 volts. You hear his discomfort grow into groans, then screams. At 150 volts, he begs you to stop. At 300 volts, his pounding becomes frantic. Some participants' hands shook so violently they could barely flip the switches. By 330 volts, silence. The man in the lab coat calmly insists. The experiment requires that you continue. Would you stop? Stanley Milgram discovered that 65% of participants pressed the final 450-volt switch, a shock they believe could be lethal. These were teachers, factory workers, secretaries, ordinary people, not sadists. And yet, despite trembling, sweating, and tears, most complied. The results shocked the world. The CIA immediately classified parts of Milgram's research, and governments scrutinized the implications. Obedience wasn't just a lab curiosity. It could explain atrocities on a massive scale. But this was only the beginning. Another experiment, in a mock prison basement, would reveal how authority can transform ordinary people into tormentors. Could you imagine yourself as a guard in a situation like that, knowing the suffering is real, but believing you must obey? After Milgram's shocking results, psychologists wanted to explore another dimension of human behavior: conformity. Solomon Asch's experiments in the 1950s offered clear, repeatable insights. Participants were asked to judge the length of lines on cards, a task so simple it seemed impossible to get wrong. But there was a catch. All the other participants were actors, instructed to give wrong answers. The real subject was the only one unaware. Time and again, people conformed. About 1/3 of participants went along with the majority, even when the answer was obviously wrong. Some physically squirmed in their seats as they gave the wrong answer, faces betraying frustration, confusion, and inner conflict. This wasn't just about lines on cards. In follow-up studies, Asch found that even obvious moral judgments could be swayed by group pressure. When everyone else says something is acceptable, our brains start to believe it too. The implications reach far beyond the lab. Think about workplace silence when witnessing harassment, or how online groups can convince ordinary people to attack strangers. The same conformity pressure that made 1950 subjects give wrong answers is shaping your social media feed right now. Humans are wired to seek approval, avoid conflict, and fit in. Even without a commanding figure, social pressure can override personal judgment. In the next section, we'll break down the 3 core psychological mechanisms behind obedience and conformity: authority bias, diffusion of responsibility, and incremental compliance, using vivid, real-world examples that reveal how these forces shape everyday decisions. Understanding why people obey requires digging into the brain's hidden rules. 3 psychological mechanisms dominate: authority bias, diffusion of responsibility, and incremental compliance. 1. Authority bias. Humans are wired to trust authority figures. Evolutionarily, following leaders kept groups alive. But this bias can be exploited. Think of a doctor in a white coat instructing a patient to take an unusual medication. Many will comply without question. In Milgram's study, participants delivered shocks because an experimenter told them to, even when they heard the learner's screams. Authority shapes our sense of right and wrong, often subconsciously. 2. Diffusion of responsibility. When multiple people share a task, individuals feel less accountable. This explains the bystander effect, famously illustrated by the Kitty Genovese case. Neighbors witnessed her attack, but did not intervene, assuming someone else would act. In corporate scandals like Wells Fargo's fake accounts, employees complied because responsibility was dispersed. I was just following orders. Diffusion of responsibility enables obedience in complex systems. 3. Incremental compliance. Small steps pave the way for larger transgressions. The foot in the door technique demonstrates this clearly. Participants agree to minor requests first, signing a petition, completing a harmless task, and are then more likely to comply with bigger, morally questionable actions. This gradual escalation explains how ordinary people commit atrocities or unethical acts without realizing the psychological slope they're on. These mechanisms often interact, creating powerful behavioral traps. Authority bias pressures people to follow leaders. Diffusion of responsibility reduces guilt. Incremental compliance normalizes small transgressions. Together, they explain why obedience persists across settings, from laboratories to offices to online communities. In the next section, we'll examine the real-world dark side of obedience, historical events, and modern examples where these mechanisms led ordinary people to commit extraordinary harm. Theory becomes chilling when it meets reality. Obedience isn't just a lab curiosity. It shapes historical events, corporate scandals, and daily life. 1. Historical example: My Lai Massacre. In 1968, during the Vietnam War, U.S. soldiers massacred between 347 and 504 civilians in the village of My Lai. Many soldiers later claimed they were just following orders. Authority bias and incremental compliance made ordinary men commit atrocities. First, they performed small, seemingly harmless tasks, reconnaissance, guarding perimeters, then gradually obeyed commands that led to mass murder. 2. Corporate example: Wells Fargo scandal. Employees at Wells Fargo opened millions of unauthorized accounts to meet aggressive sales targets. Diffusion of responsibility was rampant. Individuals felt the company, not themselves, would bear accountability. Despite knowing it was unethical, employees complied with management instructions, showing that obedience doesn't require a war zone. A corporate environment suffices. 3. Modern digital obedience. Today, authority manifests through social media algorithms, influencer endorsements, and targeted advertisements. Research shows people are significantly more likely to share content when it appears authoritative. Even fake news spreads faster when it includes official-looking logos or expert-sounding language. The same psychological mechanisms Milgram revealed now operate through screens and notifications. Pause and think. Have you ever shared something online because everyone else was sharing it, even if you weren't sure it was accurate? These examples reveal a terrifying truth. Obedience is universal and insidious. It doesn't require evil people, just ordinary humans under pressure. Recognizing the mechanisms is the first step toward resisting them. Next, we'll examine the neuroscience of obedience. What happens in your brain when you follow orders against your moral compass? Obedience isn't just psychological. Measurable changes in the brain occur when we face authority. Stress and decision-making. Studies using fMRI and other brain imaging techniques reveal that authority pressure triggers stress hormone responses, especially cortisol. High stress can impair the prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex decision-making and self-regulation. Under stress, the brain relies on simpler, automatic responses, often leading to compliance. The agentic state. Psychologist Stanley Milgram coined the term agentic state, a mental condition where people see themselves as agents executing someone else's will rather than autonomous decision-makers. Neuroscientific evidence suggests that this involves shifting cognitive resources from personal goal planning to externally guided decision-making, making compliance feel natural under pressure. Social brain networks. Research shows that resisting group pressure or authority activates networks associated with physical and emotional discomfort. Disagreeing can feel literally uncomfortable, which is why humans often conform even against moral instincts. Modern implications. Digital authority. Social media influencers, algorithmic feeds, and viral trends leverages the same neural tendencies. When everyone shares or endorses a post, our brains respond to social signals, increasing the likelihood of compliance without critical evaluation. Pause and think. The next time you feel compelled to click, share, or comply online or at work, notice the physical and emotional sensations. Are you acting from judgment or responding automatically to authority cues? With the biological roots understood, let's explore how culture influences obedience and why some societies produce more compliant populations than others. Obedience isn't universal. Culture and context shape how people respond to authority. Cultural variations. Studies replicating Milgram's work show that societies emphasizing hierarchy and respect for authority tend to have higher compliance rates, while more egalitarian cultures often resist questionable orders. These differences highlight how social norms profoundly shape our responses to authority. Digital authority today. The same psychological mechanisms now operate online. Social media algorithms, influencer endorsements, and targeted ads exploit automatic compliance. Likes, shares, and official-looking badges act as dopamine-driven reward loops, nudging users to follow authority without thinking. Micro-resistance examples. Not every encounter with authority leads to compliance. Employees refusing unethical requests, social media users fact-checking before sharing, or whistleblowers exposing corporate wrongdoing show that small acts of resistance can slow the cascade of obedience. Studies also show that pausing for just 3 seconds before complying significantly increases the likelihood of resisting unethical orders. Call to action. The next time you see a viral post, pause. Are you sharing because it's true or because an algorithm told you to? Understanding these influences is the first step to exercising ethical autonomy. In the final section, we'll highlight real-world stories of resistance, proving that defying authority is not only possible, but sometimes heroic. Obedience may be powerful, but history reminds us that resistance is possible and often heroic. Sophie Scholl, Courage in the White Rose. Sophie Scholl, part of the White Rose resistance in Nazi Germany, distributed leaflets exposing the regime's crimes. Arrested and executed at just 21, she demonstrated moral clarity in the face of extreme danger. Even in the courtroom, she refused to see herself as a mere instrument of authority. Tank Man, Silent Defiance. During the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests, one man stepped in front of a column of tanks, refusing to move. His ultimate fate remains unknown, which amplifies the symbolic power of his choice. A reminder that a single individual can challenge overwhelming force. Frances Haugen, Modern Digital Resistance. Whistleblowers like Frances Haugen reveal that resistance isn't only historical. By exposing harmful practices in social media algorithms, she demonstrated that even in corporate and digital arenas, choosing ethics over authority is possible. Micro-resistance in daily life. Small acts of resistance, questioning a manager, refusing to share unverified content, or standing up to peer pressure, ripple outward. Studies suggest that even brief pauses before complying with requests significantly increase ethical decision-making. Every small act contributes to a culture of accountability. Closing thought and CTA. Obedience isn't destiny. The next time you feel pressure, online, at work, or in social situations, pause. Ask yourself, is this a choice or an order? Your decision could ripple farther than you imagine. Share your story. Have you ever resisted authority, even in a small way? Your example might inspire others.